Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
Hey, it's me, Egbert. E-G-G-B-U-R-T. Check out my website at egbert.com. Now it's back to those two dudes who told me they would bring in big ratings. They better are their history. Here are Brad and John.
It's always nice to start out the show with positive reinforcement from your boss, isn't it? Where he just comes right out and says something good about you. God, you guys are so good. We're so happy to have you on my station. Doesn't that make you feel good, John?
It does, and it reminds us of a conversation you and I had yesterday. I thought we had great conversations yesterday, Brad. I'm not one to pat ourselves on the back. But as we mentioned yesterday, Brad, I mean, my philosophy is other people's priorities are not necessarily my priorities. And Egbert's frame of, ooh, these guys better produce, that's not how I go into the day, Brad. I just take care of myself. I make sure that I execute to the best of my ability. And however folks judge it, that's on them, Brad.
That is John Combest, C-O-M-B-E-S-T. The reason I spell it is he has this website called johncombest.com. Every day for 22 years, he toils at all hours of the day and night and early morning to put together a list of what he deems the top stories in the state of Missouri as far as political news, state news, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff. Not necessarily Muni news, but I do want to say, I want to pick up on something you brought up yesterday, and I'd like to talk about maybe in the second segment, the Kansas City Royals Stadium deal, because now there's also this thing about they're possibly going to move the Chiefs as well too. Have you heard this story?
Yeah, and I don't follow it as closely as most folks in Kansas City do, but thanks to Tony'sKansasCity.com, I do follow it a little bit.
Right, I want to talk about that a little bit later on because that was part of the deal yesterday because they lost in a bond issue, wasn't it, or a tax or something?
It was a sales
like
tax issue.
Sales tax issue to build a new stadium downtown for the Royals. Okay, John does this every single day. We get him on the air in the morning, and he takes the top three, what he deems to be the top three stories of the morning. We have a very special announcer who comes in. What's your name again?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he steps up to the microphone and says something like,
we're on our way to the number one.
And he starts off with,
in third place,
a piece of news that's not necessarily news, Brad. You say, John, that doesn't make any sense, but here's how it does. The Cook Political Report, which is a long-standing political analysis, they take a nationwide scope of things. They come out with competitive House rankings every month. They come out with competitive U.S. Senate rankings to let political folks know where the competitive races are. Uniquely, Brad, and why this is news is because Cook Political Report continues to put Missouri in the solid Republican status. They have a scale for Democrat seats. They have a scale for Republican seats. And on the Republican side, you cannot get any further deep red than Josh Hawley is right now. So the Cook Political Report goes through, and it's the number 2 link on my website today. The number 1 link actually at the top comes from State's Newsroom that does a dive into the Cook Political Report piece. And the short of it is, Brad, Missouri, as most of us know, is not a competitive U.S. Senate race this year. Now, Brad, we're coming up this weekend. It's WrestleMania weekend. I don't know if you know, but WrestleMania is a 2-day event now. The fact that this race is not competitive will not keep Josh Hawley from sending out breathless emails saying that the liberals are targeting him and he needs your cash now. It will not keep Democrats who have their own cash machine going. They got to pay staff. They got to pay people to do printing. Brad, they have to pay people to do your favorite, which are yard signs.
Yeah, my favorite.
So Democrats will say, ho, we got Josh Hawley on the ropes, according to the Losing Candidate Institute of Second Place Silver Medals. We need your money now. So we're still going to hear a lot of complaints from Josh Hawley about how he needs money. We're going to hear complaints from Democrats about how they're so close to toppling Josh Hawley. Missouri's U.S. Senate race is non-competitive, and now we have yet another monthly reminder of that from the Cook Political Report.
Okay. I'm hitting my next button.
Up a notch to number 2.
Will Scharf, candidate for Missouri Attorney General in that primary versus Andrew Bailey. Over the weekend, Brad, he got a couple more checks totaling $2.9 million.
Really?
Now, this is great for everybody, Brad, because Will can tout the fact that he's got a ton of money and he's leading in the fundraising race. Andrew Bailey, his opponent, gets another shot to call him Wall Street Willie and talk about the fact that Will Scharf does indeed have the ability to raise a lot of money and that we're not going to let some Ivy League guy purchase this attorney general seat. So $2.9 million, Brad, $1 million here, $1 million there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
It's interesting. Mr. Bailey is still all over the radio. Every time I turn on my car radio and I hit one of the buttons. Matter of fact, the other morning I heard him on Joy 99, and he was giving prayer service. I'm thinking to myself, man, this guy is everywhere. I'm going like, you can't get away from this guy. Does the guy do anything other than do PR stuff? I mean, he if he has a PR department, he might as well just get rid of him because he does all the stuff himself, right?
That would be an efficient use of taxpayer dollars, Brad. That's a pretty good thing. And in fact, I saw remakes on WTBS the other day, Turner Station, and they remade Beetle Bailey into Andrew Bailey. So they just put his face on there instead, and then Mark Cox was interviewing him, and it was a beautiful thing.
Okay. You got me on that one. Number one.
The number one.
The investigation into Missouri House Speaker Dean Plocher continues, Brad. And we've talked about this a few times before. We've given updates on it. In general, the idea that Dean Plocher incorrectly filed campaign reimbursement reports and got refunded for money that his campaign actually paid for. So in other words, the allegation of double dipping. Dean Plocher has paid that money back. As I understand it, it was a total of $4,000, and Dean Plocher has paid it back. So that investigation continues. But the really newsworthy piece, Brad, and why I put it in number one today, is there was another case for the House Special Committee on Ethics, the Ethics Committee looking into members' alleged transgressions, that happened 2 years ago. And that involved a guy named Wiley Price. Does the name Wiley Price ring a bell, Brad?
Wasn't he an appliance guy in Kansas City? Hi, I'm Wiley Price, and I'll beat any price.
He was not. He was not.
No. I'm sorry.
But this is Wiley Price IV. Wiley Price III was a prominent journalist in the St. Louis area, has a long career with the St. Louis American.
I do remember
So they're
that,
a prominent black family
right
in St. Louis City. Wiley Price, and follow me here because this ties back to the Dean Plocher situation. And, excuse me, a few years ago, a woman who works in the Missouri House claimed that Wiley Price, the state representative from the city, had an intimate relationship with a Capitol intern. Not a Capitol intern that reported to Wiley Price, but a Capitol intern that reported to another lawmaker. And that is strictly forbidden under House rules. So this woman reported it to the Ethics Committee. The Ethics Committee did an investigation and found that, first of all, the intern says nothing happened between them. Wiley Price says nothing happened between them. But the committee, as Wiley talks about in this interview with Scott Faughn, essentially went on a fishing expedition, wanted to see what else they could find. It turns out, Brad, that Wiley Price had not been truthful when he was asked if he ever had any contact with the intern. They subpoenaed his phone. They found out that the intern had texted him, that he had texted the intern, that they had a one protracted phone call. Long story short, it was shown that Wiley was not telling the truth when he said he didn't have any contact with this intern. But the committee wasn't able to ever show that he had an inappropriate relationship with this intern. However, Brad, the Post-Dispatch came out with a story a handful of days before the primary election in Missouri, and it was pretty negative. It suggested that Wiley Price was going to lose. He wouldn't be able to have committee seats anymore. He wouldn't be able to do anything for his constituents if he was reelected, and he was defeated in this primary election. So you say, okay, John, cool story. What does this have to do with anything? Scott Faughn had him on the midweek update yesterday because Wiley was able to give some insight into the processes by which the ethics committee does its thing. Most importantly, the fact that these ethics investigations seemingly take forever. Scott started the show by pointing out that two wombats, Brad, the gestation period, you could produce a wombat in less period of time, in a smaller amount of time than it takes for the ethics committee to investigate Dean Plocher. Now, Scott was being silly with that analogy, but I guess it's factually accurate. The point is, Brad, Wiley Price gave some color into what happens in these investigations, and that mostly when the committee is looking at stuff, if they've gotten everybody together and they're paying outside counsel and they're determined to find something, they're going to find something. They're going to find something on Dean Plocher, and they're going to have something to wave and say, look, we got Dean Plocher on violation X. Now, one more thing about this, Brad, is that Scott Faughn did a sunshine request looking at how much this investigation is costing for the lawyers to investigate at this point the $4,000 that Dean Plocher has already paid back. The total, at least for one portion of it, is $14,750.
I think that's,
to investigate money that Dean has already paid back. Go ahead, Brad.
I would say that's cheap.
Yeah, and that's why, that's one piece of this. So I think that's one piece that Scott had asked for a specific line item of how much one piece of the investigation costs.
Yeah, well, here we go again. It's the gotcha politics stuff. And you would think that the Democrats would learn after they went after Trump, they had the majority in the House and the Senate, and they obviously didn't have the presidency. There was a Trump one still president. But you would think that they would say, okay, if we try to impeach him twice, when the House turns back the other way, guess what's going to happen, which is what's going on right now. And it's to the point where it's like, you watch these hearings and you go like, okay, what is this helping our country? How are we moving forward? How are we becoming a better country? How are we becoming better at producing whatever and eliminating crime and stuff like that? The answer is we're not. It's all
the answer is we're not, Brad. But think of the number of people that are tasked with getting a scalp. And that's one of the phrases that Scott Faughn used when he was talking about, the Missouri Independent does a lot of these sunshine requests. And Scott indeed has issued his own sunshine request for some information about how much it's costing taxpayers for every Missouri Independent sunshine request. But the idea is that political victory for a lot of people, if you're a progressive online publication, a victory for you is to have a scalp and to say, look, we helped take down the Missouri Speaker of the House. And if you're a member of the Ethics Committee and you convene people and you take lawmakers' time and you get attention and you're spending money, and then you come back and say, hey, guess what? We spent a lot of money, didn't find anything. Everything's fine.
Well,
you have that pressure to produce something, I think.
On the deep.
And now I'll say one more thing about Wiley Price. In that what I really liked about this interview, and put partisanship aside, I don't know Wiley Price. I've never met him. I'll probably never meet him. What I liked about this is that the best word to describe him in this interview was unrepentant. He refuses to apologize for something he didn't do or something he's not, quote, guilty for doing. And in fact, Brad, he was just elected to be the Democratic committee man, like here in St. Charles County or Warren County or St. Louis County, you have township committee people. In the city, they're the Democratic committeemen, for a ward instead of a township. But Wiley Price was just elected to be Democratic committee man. I think it's for Ward 10, so that central rear end area from like 40 to 70, and then that strip of the rear end from Skinker over to like probably that Euclid area. But guess what? Now Wiley Price has a voice again in Democratic politics. And what I like about it is that in an era where every time somebody makes an allegation, and this wasn't even a Me Too allegation, Brad. This is somebody getting upset because they believe that Wiley did something. For a man to come out and refuse to apologize for something he didn't do, I got a lot of respect for that.
Well, I'm sort of in the same boat with you on that. I mean, going back to the Dean Plocher thing, I look at that and I think, once again, if Dean Plocher was a Democrat, I'd say the exact same thing right now. Okay, he screwed up in his paperwork, which essentially...
Absolutely. And let me interrupt real quick, Brad. He had for many years, remember Dean ran, an uncontested race to be state rep. For many years, up until very recently, his wife did his books. And his wife would sit down with the checkbook and try to figure out, okay, here's the money we got in. And again, that's nothing against state rep or state senator spouses. But at a certain level, when you're running statewide, hey, quote, mistakes were made. But, people are going to mess up paperwork, Brad.
Well, and once again, have we, I mean, how many of us who lived to the age we are today, with me a long time, with you not so long, how many of us have lived our lives and never had the state make a paperwork mistake on us?
Absolutely, Brad. You're exactly right there.
I mean, it's like, can we sue them? Can we have an investigation? You know, of course, oh, no, we can't do that. I'm sorry, we made a mistake. Or they'll never admit they make a mistake, but that kind of stuff. Oh, I see. And once again, $4,000. It's one-time deal. Now, if he had a history of this, where he was like, you know, pulling the same routine over and over again, yeah, he's fair game. One time, okay, let it go. And once again,
well, and now to be clear too, I think the Independent pointed out that there were, I don't know how many instances there were of it, but he has paid $4,000 back. I'm sure in every article that the Independent writes about, they document. So I would suggest folks go look at it and take a look at. And you know, if my number isn't exactly accurate, folks will, number one, they will call it out, and number two, you can go to the Independent's reporting and see whatever the total is. And then the other thing is too, Brad, they're looking at the committee today and yesterday. They've met 2 days in a row, and they're looking at one of the other allegations is that Dean Plocker was seeking to help an out-of-state company with constituent management software. And if that sounds boring, it's because it is. But again, the allegation is the Speaker of the House using his influence to help a lobbyist with a contract, help a company get a state contract? And what this does is, so, you know, the thing is, though, Brad, the funny thing about it all is that in a 10-way Secretary of State primary, if Dean Plocker is in the news every week between now and August, even in a negative way, I'm not sure it hurts him.
You know, what's sort of sad about this is sort of boring stuff, you know, the Dean Plocker thing, boring stuff. Who was, and maybe this is too long ago for you because you're a young guy, who was the senator and or congressman, I can't remember which one it was, where he was cavorting in one of the fountains in D.C. with a intern who was like 30 years younger than him. You know who I'm talking about?
George Santos, yes. He was a gay man that wore white patent leather shoes.
No, it wasn't George Santos. This is like 30 or 40 years ago. And
no, I don't know. I mean, first of all, you got to be a little more specific because I'm sure that's happened many times. I don't remember that story, though.
Well, it was somehow, apparently they'd been out drinking together and something like that. They ended up in a fountain in downtown D.C. I mean, literally like you know, one of these big fountains that they used to do all the time with like the gargoyle heads with water coming out of their mouth, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I bet there was water coming in. Well, never mind that. Go ahead.
I will look at that and see if I can find that. Okay, briefly, we've got a couple minutes left in this segment. Okay, yesterday afternoon, Mark Reardon had a guy on the air from Kansas City, and he gave this scoop on the whole deal with the Kansas City thing. First off, did you know that there is talk that they might, and here we go again, shades of Bill Bidwell, and those of you old enough like me to remember the whole crazy thing with Bill Bidwell with the Cardinals, and then Stan Kroenke, and those were both football instances, but this is baseball. The rumor is that if the Kansas City Royals don't get a new downtown stadium, which they want, they're going to move to Nashville. Have you heard this?
Yeah, and that was, in fact, a headline on Tony'sKansasCity.com yesterday, Brad.
I'm going like, okay. You know, and first off, I'm going like, okay. You know, and once again, here's the problem with and the deal was, the reason this sort of came out was they had this on the ballot on Tuesday, and essentially it wasn't a sales tax that they were going to put in a sales tax, and the sales tax was going to fund a new stadium for the Kansas City Royals to move in downtown Kansas City. Wasn't that what it was?
Yes, that's correct.
And it got defeated, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. First off, if you've ever been to Kansas City, the Royal Stadium is right there, what they call the K Stadium, Kauffman Stadium. It's right there off of 70, okay? It has great ingress and egress on both 70 and, 394 or 694, whatever it is, the one that goes around the city.
Yep.
And they have a massive parking lot. If you've ever seen an aerial view of it, and when it's football time, they take tailgating to a new level, okay? And one of the problems we had in downtown St. Louis was when we had the Rams was there was really no place to tailgate.
Very, very few spots to tailgate.
Right.
I recall that, Brad.
So the crazy thing about this is They want to come up with government money. They want you and I to, increase sales tax. And I would imagine Kansas City, it's probably like here in St. Louis. There's a lot of areas of St. Louis where the sales tax is now in double digits, now over 10% for various munis with all the crap they hang on there. I have a solution to all this crazy sports mania, okay?
I'm ready.
My solution is we draft a constitutional amendment that would make it illegal for any man to run for office in the state of Missouri. That only women could hold offices in the state of Missouri, and they wouldn't give a poop about stadiums and stuff like that, and we never have to worry about this again.
That's a reasonable proposal. Now, are women empowered then to kill spiders? And are women empowered to answer the door at 2 a.m. when somebody's banging on it?
No, that's what you have men for. But
that's right. That's exactly right.
Right. But once again, women aren't going to put a tax or some kind of a crazy, hey, we're going to finance this and we're going to build a new stadium. And I guess the thing for me is I'm one of these guys that I look at utilization, okay? When my very first career in the radio business, I used to sit at 111 South Beamiston, which is now the county jail in Clayton, and I worked all the crazy weekend shifts and the night shifts. And we had a nice window out the into the section of Clayton. Matter of fact, I could look across the street and see the county government center, and I could see up the street to see several of the high-rise buildings.
You could see Buzz Westfall changing in this office and those tidy whities. You told me that story.
I could see all that kind of stuff, and the offices were empty. Offices were empty on the weekend. Offices are empty at night. Offices are empty on holidays. So in other words, you build a building, and it's underutilized. So my problem is, and especially we built the dome for the Cardinals or for the Rams, wherever that was, and we get 8 events out of that. Okay, we built the stadium for the Cardinals. We get what, 81? Is it 81 games or something like that?
81 home games, yeah.
Okay, and that's it. I'm thinking to myself, okay, why can't that, if you're going to build something, use it every single day. And that way it pays for itself much quicker. But no, can't do that, And that to me is the whole thing. It's important. And not only that, it's like the fans in Kansas City are spoiled by the fact that they drive to, if they're going to see the Royals, they're going to see the Chiefs, they drive to the parking lot. They go in the parking lot, and the parking lots are well patrolled, and hardly anybody ever has their car broken into in Kansas City.
That's true, but also there's one way in and one way out, and you pay like $50 to park there, Brad.
But still, I mean, tell me where with Cardinals games, you park a lot during the day and it's $10. You pay if there's a Cardinals game, like for example,
that's true.
You go downtown right now, there's probably parking lots that are $100.
Okay, so that's a fair point.
Right.
Good point
so
about that.
it's like okay, enough of this sports crap. That was my old station.
That was your old station, and I know we're over time, but you know that Kansas City has a quote professional women's soccer team too. They got girls that run around chasing the ball, and they have a stadium for that too. I think they're called the Current. I think that's the girls' team over there.
John knows.
I think they have a stadium too. And I mean, like it's like WNBA, so I don't know if they actually charge to go in and watch them, but I think they play at a real stadium, or maybe they play at the YMCA. I'm not sure.
John knows these things because he's one of these guys that absolutely positively
cross the T's and dot the lowercase J's.
That's what he does. You like that? You know who that is?
I like that one.
You know who that is?
I don't know who that is.
That's Wayne. Wayne's World.
Oh, wow. I thought it was Pete Buttigieg. It sounded a little swishy, so I thought maybe it was him.
No, this is Pete Buttigieg.
No stairway. Denied.
That's another Wayne.
There we go. We go.
And is this Pete Buttigieg?
Say hello to Oyster Bunnies.
I'm sorry.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Compest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?